Okay, I'm sorry I'm a little late in getting this video up. My eyes were still bothering me for a few days. Today they are good enough to allow me to sit down in front of the computer and record this. Sorry, I'm just being a little bit obsessive compulsive here. I'm just cleaning up a little bit. Nothing really important that you have to copy. There we go. So I want to talk about file input and output using PHP. And if you'll remember, towards the beginning, probably about the 4th or 5th session along, probably the 6th maybe even, I talked about error handlers and how rather than displaying your errors on a web page for all the world to see, it would be good to just pump out a generic error message and write all of your errors into a log file rather than giving away the secrets, so to speak. So let's have a look. First, we have to know something about doing file input and output. So what I've done is I've created a variable called $filename, which simply contains the name of a file called myfile.txt. And what you have to do is create something called a file handle, or a pointer it is sometimes referred to. So we take our file name now called myfile.txt and we fopen. Fopen means file open, just simple as kind of like printf, which means print format. Fopen means file open. And what we do is our file handle, our pointer, contains where did the file successfully open, yes, no, and we will address our file using the file handle from there on. So we go fopen, file name, and R, if you remember, means to read. So what we do then down here is we're checking to see if the file handle, our pointer, actually contains a success or a failure. So we go if file handle equals false, in other words the file failed to open, then we simply print an error message which says failed to open, then the file name for reading, and then exiting. There's our file name, so print F, and then the substitution with %s there, and then exit. If on the other hand we succeed, what we do is we get the size of the file, see a $size equals file size of file name, and then we print the text contained in the file, if any. So we have here where fread means file read. So we take the file handle, our pointer to the file, and we read the file for the amount of data that file size up here in the previous line reports. So if our file size is 10K, fread would read 10K and print it. And then, as with opening a SQL database, we have to properly close the file at the end of the process. So here we go fclose or file close, and then the file handle. Now you notice we're using the file handle and not file name at this point in time because we're switched into the pointer mode when we open it. So let's have a look at what happens here and see. A second or two for the browser to open. And we get this big orange error box which says, warning, there was no file to open. And down here it says error failed to open myfile.txt for reading, exiting. Now on a lot of other versions of PHP you wouldn't get this. Most of this would be stored in the web server's log files. But this is just a very elementary program that basically explains or displays the use of fopen. Okay, took a little bit there. I actually had to restart the system. For some reason it had logged up. So this is very, very similar in many respects. All I've done is, in this case, is I actually have a file on the hard drive to read. So let's try this out. A minute for the browser to pop up. And we see it says file text, some simple text from our write routine. February 22nd, 2019, 12:52. And again, the only thing really different in our file here is the file name. I look at it, change it back and forth. That's all you'll see change at the top there is the file name. But now let's try with a write command. So here you'll see at the top I've got a file name again, a file. I'm using the same file name as in the previous script here. So it says a file.txt. We do the file handle equals fopen file name. In this case, a plus is opening the file for appending. It creates if the file doesn't exist. And then we do an error check to see if the file exists or not. If it doesn't exist, spit out an error message and exit. Now here it says we've got some text to write. So we have a variable that we're creating called text to write, which contains the line some simple text from our write routine at, and then we put the date and the time in. And then here we see file write, the file handle, and then the text to write. So we write to our file called a file.txt, this piece of text here. And then we print out to the screen whether we succeeded or not. And then, for safety's sake, close the file. So let's see what happens. It says success, 134 characters written to a file.txt. Now let's go back to our previous program and print out the text here. We see now that the line is printed twice with 2 different times there. So I'm going to delete that file. Go into our directory here. I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to make another change here. Our file. There we go, just a little bit, nothing much. So let's run it again. Success, it says 67 characters written to a file.txt. We go back and look at it now. And we're back to 1 entry. If I go back now and run this script again, it says we have 134 characters. Now 201 characters, so let's go back and look. I've run it several times. And you can see that we have 1, 2, 3 lines in our text now. Now let's go take a look at what I've done to our error handler program. Much of it is very similar to what we did before, and you can see that I've actually commented out here some lines of code. And this is the stuff that actually echoed what we were doing to the screen, and then it echoed the error codes out. But in this case, what I've done, if I go up to the top of the file, you'll see that I've assigned a file name called errors.log, and we're putting it in a folder called logs. So the file name is logs/errors.log, and the file pointer fopen file name a+. So we've opened the file for augmenting, creating it if it does not exist. I used the word augmenting there, appending would be better. So this is exactly the same as we saw previously in the error handler. But now if we come down here, here's our switch statement that we had before, which is seeing if what our error is being passed to the error handler. So if we have a user error, now you'll notice a lot of changes here. So we're assigning a variable called textout, which is going to be written to our log file in this case instead of to the screen, whereas previously in this version, in the other version of the error handler, we wrote out to the web page, which we don't want to do. So just some basic handling. There's the date and the time and the error message and some other odds and ends. If we look down here, here's our file write out to the file pointer, our text message, and then we close the file, and then we call an output generic error message and exit. And the break just takes us out of this little routine here. So output generic error message, all it does is says, hey there's been an error, so sorry about that. And we don't tell the people on the other end what the error was. Now you could conceivably make this error message contain anything you want, such as, hey, an error has occurred, the time and the date is, email the webmaster, and then it could have a link to email you, although that's not the best because spam harvesters and phishing harvesters are going to be looking for that. But it's a thought. And then you have to realize that this is often referred to security by obscurity. And this alone will not secure your web page, but this is one part of the larger picture. So let's see what happens when we run this. It says an error has occurred, and it gives the date and the time, though the time is incorrect on my virtual machine. And then here's basically some printouts of what we're trying to feed to our subroutines. But you'll notice that our error messages are not there anymore. They're in a log file. In a folder called logs. So if we take a look at that, there's our error messages. Now I'm going to delete this log file and start fresh. Just minimize that for now. Close that. And let's rerun this again. And the inevitable Firefox is installing an update. There's our generic page with a few pieces of text in it. Here's our new log file. We open it. You see my notice value at position 2 is not a number using 0. Then we have another one, which is my warning incorrect input vector array of values as expected. And then down here we have a fatal error, which indicates that what we were trying to do basically imploded the script at that point. And we caught it, printed an error message, and exited cleanly. Anyway, that's it for now. Now, I'm not going to cover anything with the project tonight. I just basically wanted to get into file input and output. And this was pretty darn basic because there's an awful lot more that you can do with file input output than what I've shown you here tonight. There we have it. Okay.